Smith's and Bragg's campaign ends where it should have had a lot more success than they did, but they did have some success. All right. Number one, they forced the withdrawal of federal troops from northern Alabama and the bulk of middle Tennessee, except Nashville. Bragg shows a gifted strategist, leaving troops to cover Mississippi and northwest Alabama, sending reinforcements to Kirby Smith, sent 2 divisions. Maneuver warfare, very, very good at that. Captures 4,000 Federals at Munfordville. Smith destroys a 9,000-man Union Army at the Battle of Richmond, Kentucky. A wonderful, wonderful battlefield if you ever get up there. The drawbacks, lack of food and water. There was a drought going on in Kentucky. That's one of the reasons why they're trying to find Proctor's Creek to get some water for the canteens. And therefore, without food and water, they couldn't stay there because they couldn't eat the dry dirt. Hoping to get the recruits that I talked about already, and Breckinridge, the political mistake, and Kirby Smith failing to cooperate with Bragg when the 2 armies combined could have probably beaten Buell. Yeah, as it was, Bragg defeats him at Perryville, but the 2 of them combined probably could have done more. Bragg's and Smith's campaign was more successful than Lee's campaign in Maryland at this same time. Lee goes up and gets drubbed at Sharpsburg, almost gets his army destroyed, dares McClellan to drive the next day to drive him into the Potomac River. And McClellan's got 2 full corps of fresh troops that didn't even commit. Lee's army would have been destroyed if I'm in command, if Patton's in command, if Lee was in command of the Army of Potomac. Would have been destroyed. If you got an army with a river to the back and you can't get across that river easily, you smash them. You don't want to have to fight them again. Larry Hewitt had an interesting thing in his essay about this part of the campaign about Bragg. He says, Bragg passes the Wellington test and Lee does not. The Duke of Wellington, arguably probably one of the 2 best British generals of all time, Sir John Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough, Winston's ancestor, being the other one, in my opinion. And the Duke's test of true generalship was to know when to retreat and to dare to do it. You can fight another day. You don't risk your army with your back to the Potomac River and a hard way to get across that river to escape from McClellan. But he lucked out. So this all-fronts offensive of the Confederacy, Lee in Virginia, Maryland, what I just showed you, the Confederates in the Trans-Mississippi are moving into Arkansas, is the real high water mark of the Confederacy, so saith the late, great Ed Bars. Not that little clump of trees in a Pennsylvania field in July 1863. That's why I don't get invited to Gettysburg very often, because that is not the high water mark of the Confederacy. But where does the failure lie? In the lack of coordination and not appointing an overall commander for this combined fronts offensive, especially from Tennessee and Virginia into Kentucky. That man's desk. Jefferson Davis failed to appoint an overall commander to issue orders as a big overall commander like Sidney Johnston was earlier in 1862. When Johnston goes away, they divide up his department into 2 departments. Kirby Smith gets part of it, and Bragg gets the other part. And that's part of the problem, is he doesn't have an uber commander. This is a failure of the Harry Truman, the buck stops here thing that he would have on his desk. So Bragg and Smith fall back to Murfreesboro. Smith gets transferred to the Trans-Mississippi, where it becomes known as Kirby Smithdom, and Smith's troops become his 3rd Corps for a time, and Bragg will plan his next move. And so he's tried to take Nashville, because if he wins at Shiloh, he's crossing the Tennessee River to go to Nashville. If he wins in Kentucky and destroys Buell, Negley's going to have to abandon Nashville. He gets Nashville back. This is the 3rd time, and here he is 35 miles away in Murfreesboro from Nashville. This will be the 2nd time, or the 1st time they get close to the Rock City, as Nashville was called back in those days. And the army will coalesce there. And in front of that army will be the new army of the 14th Corps, left, center, and right wing, formerly the Army of the Ohio under Buell, now under William Stark Rosecrans, who is one of my favorite Union generals, an outstanding logistician, understood logistics very, very well. So this is attempt number 3, the Battle of Murfreesboro or Stones River. Bragg and Rosecrans are figuring out who's going to pull the trigger first. Bragg will pull the trigger first. The problem is, a few days before the battle, because of things heating up in Vicksburg, Bragg has to send his largest division under Carter Stevenson, 9,000 troops, down to Mississippi. He's just lost 9,000 guys. So his battle plan is to do a right wheel turn and shove Rosecrans into the Stones River, which is a creek. How many of you have been there? It's not like your big river here. It's like, you can wade it in most places without getting your knees wet. A turn like this, Cleburne's division back here is the reserve. And when they get tired, that's when the Cleburne's division will deploy and strike the coup de main and destroy Rosecrans' army. But because of the lack of troops and because when the plan kicks off, John McCown's division, who's Bragg's worst division commander, which is, by the way, why he sends him to Kirby Smith earlier in the year, will pin off and go after the Union cavalry this way, opening up a gap. And Cleburne now is to come up and about here will fill in the gap. If you come to Murfreesboro, Highway 96 is the main drag right off I-24. If you get off at Highway 96 and go west, you'll see the Kroger store. We call that the Patrick Cleburne Kroger store because that's where Cleburne's division marches up from reserve and fills in the gap in the line. I think they stopped and got some subs at the deli and, some cans of Spam and things like that. So they're pretty well provisioned. And then on they go. But by the time they get over here, they're going to be pretty spent. I mean, the Rosecrans puts up a pretty stout defense on his right flank. So this is the first day, and there's a day of rest in between. And then the second day, Bragg will try to send troops across the Stones River at McFadden's Ford into the barrels of about 40-plus Union pieces of artillery on the ridge, and that's where the Orphan Brigade gets shot to pieces. And then the Federals will counterattack and go after Union artillery positions up on some of the hills just south of the Stones River. So Bragg will now have to fall back because he's running low on supplies. It's winter. Typically in the musket era, you don't do winter campaigns. Napoleon did a couple. You tend not to. Washington, of course, did at Trenton, but you tended not to do that. So Bragg will fall back and set up his new headquarters in Tullahoma, which is down here. And he'll put Polk's Corps here at Shelbyville, and he'll put Hardee's Corps over here holding the gaps. So they're wintering, they're getting reinforcements. Bragg loses another division in about 2 more months. It's going to go down to Mississippi, which knocks him down to 4 divisions of infantry and 3 divisions of cavalry. And then he loses one of his divisions of cavalry when on the eve of the Tullahoma campaign, John Hunt Morgan requests to take his division to up towards Louisville, destroy the railroad. And Joe Wheeler and Bragg say, take one of your brigades. I need your other brigade to hold my right flank up on the Cumberland Plateau foothills there. And Morgan takes his entire division. Crosses the Ohio River into Indiana, gets destroyed in Ohio, and there goes Bragg's screen on his right. And as he does that, Rosecrans, has been probing Bragg's lines all across that are going from the Franklin area, Spring Hill over this way, all the way up to McMinnville, Woodbury. So that's about a 60-mile front, and Bragg's cavalry is being rejuvenated under David Sloan Stanley. Rosecrans cavalry. And he's training these guys up, getting good brigade commanders and stuff into place, and he starts letting these guys loose in March. They will defeat Morgan 3 times over here, and they will start punching into the center to find out what's going on, and then Forts and Van Dorn will beat up the Union cavalry over there on the west side. What Rosecrans learns is where Bragg is weak, and that's where Morgan was, or is, and then when Morgan leaves, it's even weaker. Because it's like a football thing. When you get the ball to your tailback, is he going to go straight up the middle if that's what the strength of the other guy's defensive line is? No, he's going to look for the weak points. That's what your linemen are supposed to do, is punch that hole in the weak part of the line and let the tailback or the fullback go. Same thing. That's what Rosecrans is trying to do here. So the Tullahoma campaign will kick off in late June, a brilliant campaign where Rosecrans will do his coup de main this way and try to get below here to Winchester. His first day is Lumley Stand and get down here to Manchester, and that puts where Bragg's headquarters is here, Polk's here. That will put Rosecrans on Bragg's flank, and the plan is to force Bragg to come and fight him off of his position. And usually the enemy, the army commander that can pick his battlefield, Wellington at Waterloo, what's his name at Gettysburg, Meade at Gettysburg, picking the ridges there, usually tends to win the battle. The problem is the day of the campaign, it starts to rain and rains and rains and rains. Where some of the gun barrels in Bragg's army or Rosecrans' army are up to the hubs, and there are 30, 40 guys trying to push these guns through the muck. And as one Confederate soldier said, it wasn't just a regular rain, it was a Baptist downpour. That's for you, David. I was saving that line for you. As we said, it's a regular Baptist downpour. This was immersion with the baptism of the whole army by both armies by being soaking wet. So Bragg is going to pull back from the Tullahoma campaign. So this is Rosecrans' idea. Feint, move, or feint, coup de main. And he's using the flanks. And he gets down and rebuilds the railroad. He's down at the mountains around Cowan, just above Chattanooga, up in this area. And in August of '63, after rebuilding the bridges and stuff, he launches another campaign to take Chattanooga, feint north, fakes out Forrest with Wilder's guys, crosses south because Wheeler's cavalry is below the Tennessee River being fed. It's a civilian farmer that walks into Bragg's headquarters and goes, General, you know there's a bunch of guys in blue crossing to the southwest of this city in great strength? Really? Only this time, instead of backing up, Bragg decides he's going to take the snap of the football and step into the pocket. Rosecrans is trying time number 2, and this will lead directly to the Battle of Chickamauga. Attempt number 4. Bragg's plan is if I destroy Rosecrans here, and he tries several times picking off detachments of Rosecrans' armies that are coming through the gaps, and they keep misfiring down in this McLemore's Cove area. The plan then is as the armies are moving north into terrain that nobody with a brain wants to fight in, because it's woods with little clearings. It's still, to me, the most confusing battle in the Western Theater because it's so darn hard to understand. You can't go on. At Antietam, you step out behind the visitor center where S.D. Lee's artillery battalion was. You can see pretty much 95% of the battlefield. You can do that in some places at Shiloh. You can do that in some other battlefields. But here, it's like, who knows? Both armies moving this way. Rosecrans will try to keep close to his base of supply. Bragg trying to cut him off. He gets reinforced by 2 of Longstreet's divisions from the east and divides his army command up in the middle of the night. It's actually a 3-day fight, 18th, 19th, 20th. Everything that happens on the 18th sets up the 19th and 20th. And on the 20th, of course, the plan is to launch an attack down here by Breckinridge's troops to get behind Rosecrans and shove him this way with an echelon assault down the line, and then Longstreet through the middle, and then shove Rosecrans into McLemore's Cove, where he will be destroyed in sight, and then off to Nashville we go, reconquering what we just lost. Well, that doesn't happen. Longstreet breaks through the center and turns the other direction and heads towards Chattanooga with his troops. George Thomas earns his nickname, the Rock of Chickamauga. Rosecrans falls back to the city and is besieged by Bragg. And Bragg is hopefully going to try to win this siege. If you understand the command structure of the Army of Tennessee, there's nothing but little infighting and nitpicking, and we hate Bragg, and Bragg's now bashing on the Tennesseans and bashing on the Kentuckians. It's a mess, and Longstreet gets sucked into that. Longstreet thinks he should command, and that's why Bragg will send him up to go after Knoxville. But although the goal is Nashville, he will surrender initiative, lay siege, and he will try to start a new front in East Tennessee with Longstreet. Pretty good. He's still using maneuver. Powerful Union reinforcements and a new commander, Grant. Vicksburg has fallen. The Army of the Tennessee is on the way in mass. And they will break the siege and drive Bragg away in late November. Lookout Mountain, Orchard Knob, Battle of Missionary Ridge. Probably the worst day in the history of the Army of Tennessee. Bragg will fall back to Dalton in North Georgia and will resign command of the Army in December to be replaced by Joseph Eggleston Johnston. And Bragg will now become an advisor to Jefferson Davis. Here comes the plan from Davis. Okay, here's the deal. I'll give you reinforcements if you go on the offensive. And Johnston says, this army just got the tar beat out of it. We've lost about 60 pieces of artillery. Yep. We lost a whole bunch of wagons to Longstreet because when Longstreet came west, he didn't bring any wagons with him. And if he's going to do a campaign, he's got to have supply mobility. So I gave him a bunch of my wagons. So I need to get new wagons from the wagon factory in Atlanta to replace that. So I'm kind of immobile. I need to get my army rebuilt. And so why don't you send me reinforcements and I'll develop the campaign depending on what Sherman's going to do. Sherman now in command. Grant is going to be in the east overseeing everything over there and the Union Army in general. So the new offensive plan that Davis urges is, okay, so go from Dalton up to Maryville, Knoxville, come across the Cumberland Plateau and take Nashville this way. I don't see a railroad that goes from Maryville, Knoxville, London to Sparta, Nashville. There is one now. You know what else is on that map? I-40. How are you going to run supply line for an army up to here? You're going to be fine here because that's a fertile valley going up to where the railroad is. But from here to here, no, you don't grow anything on the plateau. You grow limestone. That's what you grow up on the Cumberland Plateau. I love the Cumberland Plateau. There's no food up there. You don't get food until you get to the Nashville Basin down in this part and over by where Columbia is. And in the meantime, if you pull the Confederate Army of Tennessee this way, what's Sherman going to do? Wow. Let's go here. So this isn't going to work. So Davis will acquiesce and send Johnston some reinforcements. Massively. In fact, this is the largest the Army of Tennessee is ever going to be. Between the start of the campaign and the end of the campaign, about 85,000 men go through the Army. At the apogee at Kennesaw Line, it's 75,000 troops. So the Army of Tennessee, unfortunately, isn't going on the offensive. Johnston's plan is, let's see what Sherman does. I'll beat him in North Georgia, then I'll go on the offensive. Okay, but they're going to spend the whole campaign backpedaling, ding, 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 till September 2nd, 1864, when Atlanta falls and Sherman sends that electrifying telegram to Lincoln, Atlanta is ours and fairly won. And Lincoln goes, I've just won the election in November. And Mobile Bay didn't hurt, and 3rd Winchester didn't hurt, and Cedar Creek didn't hurt. But the big one was Atlanta. The American people can relate to capturing an important place. And Atlanta was the industrial center and supply center of the Confederacy in the West because of the the 4 railroads that come into metro Atlanta. Now, the Confederates get really good at shipping stuff out. In fact, they send it to Macon, they send it to Augusta and Columbus. But by the time that Atlanta falls, it's no longer a major distribution center. So that's going to set up the next attempt. So Davis comes down. This will be his second appearance coming down to the Army of Tennessee. The first time he's sitting in front of Braxton Bragg and listening to all the officers line up and saying why they hate Braxton Bragg in front of Braxton Bragg, and then decides to keep Braxton Bragg as commander of the Army. That must have been a bad day. So he comes down to build up the morale of the Army of Tennessee, who's now fallen down to Palmetto, well, first Lovejoy Station, and then Palmetto. And he gives a rousing speech to his troops. Men, we're going to take your banners north again and go on the offensive. The newspaper cries, President Davis today said, running off his mouth like he shouldn't, violating operational security. That's me writing that article. Tells us they're going to go on the offensive. Sherman was an avid reader of Southern newspapers. Sherman carried the Georgia census with him on the Atlanta campaign. He knew where to go. He knew where the food was grown. He knew where the industrial centers were. He reads like, hey guys, he's sitting with his officers going, look what the Confederates are going to do. They're going to go on the offensive. General Thomas, you will take 4th Corps and 23rd Corps back to Tennessee. And then when the campaign kicks off, Sherman will kind of humor John Bell Hood, the new commander. But before this kicks off, I found this. I'm the only historian who's found Jefferson Davis's Facebook page. Here it is, right here. He logs in, he goes with the name Jeffy D. Got to get hip to the kids. Got to get the kids involved. Told the boys we was going back to Tennessee. Hood is the man, am right? Booyah! My wife's 7th graders. Booyah! Whatever that means. General Sherman likes that. He loves it. Billy Cump, it's his handle there. Bring it. Thomas is going to kick butt. That's the gist of the Tennessee campaign, attempt number 5. So Hood is going to fight the Atlanta campaign in reverse, all the way up to Dalton, Georgia. He'll bag some garrisons. He fails to take Allatoona with Samuel French's division, sends an understrength division to go after 2 very well dug-in forts up there with artillery, Henry repeating rifles with the 7th Illinois, et cetera, and there's 2 million rations there at Allatoona at the warehouses. The foundations of that warehouse used to be there until about 1998, something like that. And then they put a parking lot where it was, which is really sad. On the shores of Lake Allatoona, and because of that, by the time he gets over here, he's starving. He's got major food problems. So he will go up here. Sherman will chase him, and then when he turns down here to meet with Beauregard in this area, who's now the new theater commander and is massing supplies at Gadsden and Blue Mountain area, that's when Sherman goes, If he will go to Ohio, the Ohio River, I will give him rations. He's not my problem anymore. Why? I'm going to Savannah because I hear the food's great. So that's where he formulates the Atlanta campaign once he convinces Grant and Lincoln that it's cool to do it. So Hood comes down here and you read Steve Davis's biography, second volume biography about Hood, how he fails to obey Beauregard's orders and he just starts moving around. Tries to cross at Guntersville. Union Navy has gunboats all the way up to Knoxville area. They divide the rivers into river districts and they will assign X amount of gunboats to each district. There's a couple gunboats at Guntersville in the area, and so Hood will sidle over here to Decatur. It does not send enough combat power to really capture the garrison of Decatur. They've just reprinted Noel Carpenter's book on the battle there, A Slight Demonstration, I believe it's called. Great book, read it, it's fantastic. But between Decatur and moving over here to Tuscumbia on that side of the river and Hood losing 3 weeks is where he's going to lose, in my opinion, the campaign. 3 weeks to allow Thomas to mass everything he needs. And Sherman says, if it's wearing blue in Tennessee or Kentucky or Ohio or Indiana, call him in. And that's exactly what he does. He pulls the Chattanooga garrison out. He pulls the Clarksville garrison out. He pulls troops down from Bowling Green. He's pulling them in from everywhere. He sends the Chattanooga garrison to Fortress Rosecrans at Murfreesboro. And I was talking to Jim Lewis, as chief ranger at Stones River. They manage Fortress Rosecrans. 200-acre, largest earthen fort ever built in North America, 20-foot high walls, 52 pieces of heavy artillery, zeroed out to 2 miles. The map is in the ORs. You can see where those guns are aimed. And they end up with about 9,000 men there, 4 interior redoubts, and said, hey, Jim, if Hood, instead of going to Franklin after Spring Hill, comes over, can he take Fortress Rosecrans? Jim just started laughing, which means no. 5,200, I don't care you got 9,000 men, 52 pieces of heavy artillery, zeroed out to 2 miles, you're not taking Fortress Rosecrans, which had lots of rations in it. So we know what happens here. Hood finally crosses. Forces come down from destroying Johnsonville. Some of the Tennessee campaign guys like to bag on Forrest. Well, Forrest was late. Forrest didn't work for Hood. Forrest worked for Dick Taylor, who was the department commander here in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, replacing S.D. Lee, who's gone to Georgia to command a corps after Polk's killed. And so Forrest finally gets down here, joins up. Now he's got a cavalry command along with Jackson's cavalry division, which is a really good cavalry division. In fact, might be the best one he had. And starts the campaign heading towards Nashville with about 30,000+ troops and probably the greatest forlorn hope of the entire Civil War. And in doing so, what does Hood uncover? The Franklin guys will sit there and go, what else could Hood have done? You're going to uncover Selma, Montgomery, Columbus, Macon, and the Augusta powder mill and leave it no protection from Sherman? That's what you're uncovering by Hood coming north. Why don't you stay in Georgia? Maybe you can beat Sherman down there and cause some major problems. So we see what he does. The Army's elated, especially the Tennessee boys, as they cross the state line into the volunteer state and heads on up. On November 30th, after the debacle at Spring Hill, Jamie Gillam's book on Spring Hill, in my opinion, is the best book on it. It's a very detailed hour-to-hour breakdown of Spring Hill. Fantastic book. And by the way, if you want to get him down here, let me know. He lives in Spring Hill. He's a great guy. And you get the Battle of Franklin against John Schofield, entrenched. Hood's guys pull up, and they launch a frontal assault. 6 generals killed and wounded, mortally wounded, 55 regimental commanders killed and wounded. My favorite guy, Pat Claiborne, killed there. As he says to Daniel Govan from Winstead Hill, not many of us boys, Govan says to him, not many of us are going to get back to Arkansas, General Claiborne. He says, well, if we're going to die, let us die like men. The really bad, silly thing of this campaign is after losing about 9,000 troops at Franklin, is he thinks he can go up and lay siege to Nashville. Thomas has about 40,000 troops there. He's getting more. A.J. Smith's 12,000 guys are coming. The left wing of the 16th Corps. A.J. Smith's guerrillas, they've been running around Louisiana. They were chasing Price across Missouri. Now they're on the steamboats coming into Nashville before Chalmers cuts the river at Bell's Bend, and they get in there. And that's where supposedly Thomas does a jig and gives him a big hug and stuff, which is pretty fun to see because Tom was a fairly portly guy. He's just digging in and basically saying, bring it. And the one thing that never gets counted in the Union garrison, at Nashville, are the 7,000 quartermaster regiment troops. There are 8 regiments of quartermaster troops. Guys that worked in the quartermaster depots in Nashville that formed in September 1864 and drilled on a regular basis. They had colors, they had arms, they had everything. Part of the 1st Quartermaster Regiment was at Johnsonville fighting Forrest, and they manned an interior line. And when people say, oh, those guys were just, somewhat drilled troops, they weren't veterans. Really? Have you heard about the Battle of Bunker Hill? Where a bunch of guys, very few of whom fought in the French Indian War, just a bunch of farmers from New England with muskets behind a dirt wall, shot to pieces the British Army until they ran out of ammunition? Don't tell me what a guy with a rifle behind a dirt wall can do. That's a motivator right there. I got the dirt wall in front of me. I can stay here till I either run out of bullets or they've turned my flank. Those guys don't get counted because they're not Army personnel. They're civilians. So Thomas's army is bigger. The weather turns really bad on December 9th. It gets down to like 20 below zero. Imagine these Confederates at the Brentwood Hills south of town. If you go to Fort Negley and you look south, you'll see the Brentwood Hills. In fact, it's called the Battle of Brentwood Hills initially. And a professor, geology professor up at Austin P, where I'm at, did an analysis of the soil at Shies Hill and all along the Confederate line. And that kind of soil froze quickly with the moisture. Trenches are supposed to be 6 feet deep. He said the deepest they could get on Shies Hill was 3 feet. That's not a big trench. That's laying down type stuff. You're not going to stand up in that. And meanwhile, in downtown Nashville, circus is in town. James Wilson needs horses. He takes the horses from the circus. Andrew Johnson gives him his horses, etc., etc. And Thomas is telling Grant, because Grant's saying, pull the trigger. You got Hood exactly where you want him. The spires of Nashville right to his front. And Thomas saying, the horses in town can't stand up because of the ice here. Wait till it melts and then I'll launch my attack. So he gets tired of hearing that, and he will send John Logan on his way with peremptory orders that when he walks into Thomas's headquarters in Nashville, if Thomas has not attacked, to hand him the orders, relieve him of command, and immediately launch an attack. He makes it to Cincinnati. On December 15th, Thomas launches a massive assault, turning the Confederate left flank on the river, driving Chalmers away from the river, opening up the river supply line again, and then on down. You can see this complete left wheel turn, slams into the 5 redoubts here, overruns them, shoves the Confederates back in this direction, gets the cavalry down below Hood, so Hood's flank is going to collapse, and he will fall back about 2 miles that night to build a second line. Day number 2 on December 16th, here's a much shorter line. Thomas will turn the flanks, not so much on this side, but on this side with Wilson's cavalry again, and cause a complete collapse. Shies Hill gets overrun. Peach Orchard Hill will stand on that side, and it's not a good day for Hood's army. They will start to fall back, and Forrest, who's been detached with an infantry division to go assault Murfreesboro, did not know the Fortress Rosecrans was there. They built it because of his attack on Murfreesboro on his birthday in July of 1862. And Forrest rides up and goes, this wasn't here 2 years ago. No, it was not. No, it was not. So he's not going to do well over there. He will come back and take over with an infantry division, the rear guard of the army. And that will save the Army of Tennessee from being destroyed. Now they move through this area on the way up. Guess who's coming back? Right through the area. The Army of Tennessee finally gets to see the spires of Nashville. Literally, there they are. There's the Capitol, there's the churches, etc. And they're destroyed in its namesake state. What's left will come back to Alabama. Part will be sent to North Carolina. The part that had been Polk's old Army of Mississippi goes down to Mobile, where they'll be captured at Spanish Fort and Fort Blakely in 1865. Hood resigns command, and off he goes into nothing for the rest of the war. So this ends the 5 attempts to take the Rock City, and the 5th attempt is even closer to getting to where they wanted to go than at the Battle of Murfreesboro a couple years earlier. So the siege of Nashville, or the city of Nashville, with the sirens singing to the Confederates for 4 years, emulating their ancient sisters, will finally bring destruction on the rocks south of the city of Nashville. I forgot this picture is still in there. Where I live, whoops, I don't know. Oh, I don't know why that slide kept over. Anyway, Clarksville, where I live, and Dover, where Fort Donelson is, was occupied by a number of Union infantry units during the war. The 83rd Illinois shows up in '63, and they're going to be there pretty much for the rest of the war. And this slide has two famous guys in it. Actually, that guy is the famous guy. This guy is the grandfather of a famous guy right here. That's Company B of the 83rd Illinois. They're from northwestern Illinois, Knox County, Galesburg area towards the Mississippi River. This guy here will later become real famous in the gunfight at the OK Corral. That's Virgil Earp. Wyatt and Morgan were too young to serve. Other Earps were in the 83rd. If you know where the Earp homestead is in Illinois, it's near Knox County. So there were other Earps that were in other regiments, and Virgil gets into this one. He will spend the day in Clarksville's jail for stealing money, which looked great on the resume for United States Marshal. Well, I see you stole some money in the Civil War. Well, you know. This picture is either late Civil War or not long after. I got it from the museum in Tombstone, Arizona. Dodge City didn't have one. And I told the lady, I said, look, I'll do this is for our Fort Defiance Interpretive Center in Clarksville that I was the historian for. And I said, look, I'll do you a favor. I'll send you the paperwork about Wyatt or Virgil being arrested for stealing money. Goes, ma'am, the lady goes, he wouldn't do that. So I will send you the provost marshal report. And I put it in the mail and sent it off to her. She sent me the picture anyway. My friend John, who lives in Dover, collects 83rd Illinois stuff, and this picture turned up about 12, 14 years ago. That man right there, Marion Morrison. He is badly wounded near Fort Henry in an anti-guerrilla operation, a lot of guerrilla activity through our area there. He will move after the war to Iowa, and then we'll have a kid named, wait for it, Marion Morrison. And then that guy moves to California and has a kid named, once more, Marion Morrison. That guy will grow up to play football for University of Southern California, decide to try this new Hollywood thing, but Marion Morrison doesn't sizzle. John Wayne sure does. That is the Duke's grandfather. So imagine, if you will, if he dies of that head wound near Fort Henry, because then we wouldn't have the Duke, Pilgrim. Thank you very much for having me down. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. If you want to drag me out and throw me in the river, I could probably use a swim. Thanks, folks.